everybody. We have a very intimate crowd, so that will give us the luxury of not just me asking questions, but maybe if you all agree, we can even open it up later to the audience, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And they promise they have a best prize. They have a prize for the best question, the two best questions, right?
Yeah, of course.
All right.
I think we budgeted that in. So.
You have it, right? Yeah. All right. So we are going to discuss the topic of fortifying DeFi, innovations, security, and interoperability. How do we bring hardening and what in the world that I come from being called enterprise-grade strength and hardening. Is the microphone cutting out? Thank you. And to discuss that topic, we have two very smart, very bright entrepreneurs that I personally feel very, very enthusiastic about from the last couple of days that I've spent with them. It looks like I'm hosting them, but the truth is they've been hosting me since I don't live over here. My name is Gurvinder Ahluwalia. I won't bore you with the bio that you've already been bored with, but I will say briefly, I'm based in the US, and I've worked in the enterprise space quite extensively. Is the microphone still cutting out? All right. And I have the luxury, it is cutting out. I can hear myself intermittently.
Let's try that. That's much better. Thank you.
Yeah. He's bringing me another one. Thank you. And I did have the privilege of holding the front row seat to not just a witness, but a practitioner to stewarding change in the last 4 or 5 waves of disruption in technology over the last over 20 years based out of the US. And when you see that, you begin to see some patterns of weaknesses and strengths. And I think, of course, there are a lot of strengths in the world that we've entered into in decentralized finance, but we are here to understand the weaknesses and how to fortify and how the two ventures that are represented over here by Sujith and Ritwik are going to handle some of that. So Sujith is the founder and the code committer for Re DAO, which is a reinsurance protocol. Did I say that right?
Insurance and reinsurance protocol.
Reinsurance and insurance.
It's important not just to have reinsurance if the insurance layer is not solid enough. So we're building it from the ground up.
And Ritwik is the CEO and also my across the street colleagues from a 30-year differential from our college days at University of Delhi. Yeah. He studied at Hindu College and I'm from St. Stephen's College. Friendly competition.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And he is the CEO of SYNTHR, which is in the business of bringing interoperability through synthetic assets. I'll let you do the elaboration, Ritwik.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here. So SYNTHR is an omni-chain synthetic asset protocol. What we enable users to do is mint highly solvent and omni-chain synthetic assets. I obviously won't take too much of the time in giving the introduction, but with the way interoperability has progressed through time is we obviously saw bridges being responsible for moving value across networks historically. And now what we're seeing is bridges have now slowly are being replaced by these omni-chain ecosystems and application layers. And what they effectively enable users to do is mint these synthetic assets which can exist on any sort of ecosystem without the need to bridge. So what we're effectively doing is making bridges obsolete. And we're doing that using synthetic assets as a layer, as a liquidity layer, which not just users can tap into, but also other applications and ecosystems can also tap into. And if you check out our website, a true testament of what we're building is we've received 12 grants from ecosystems, these new L1s and L2s that are coming up, who are actually hungry for liquidity, right? And everyone wants a capital-efficient way for users to enter their ecosystems, and which is why they're actually inviting SYNTHR to come and deploy in their ecosystems, because they want a capital-efficient gateway into their ecosystem, right? So that's what we are in the business of doing. So thanks so much for that.
Thank you, Ritwik. So as we get into the discussion over here, the first question I have is, what is the problem each of you and your ventures is solving? Just net it out in the most simplistic terms for this intimate group. Sujith, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the security in the space, especially when it comes to protocol builders or even normal DeFi users, one of the main problems that we see is that there is an over-reliance on security audits. And something that we have seen happening quite a lot is that protocols get audited, they launch, and then a couple of days later, they manage to get hacked. And your auditing agency is not going to be there out to say that, oh, I'm sorry, you guys got hacked. Here's $1 million in check to compensate your users. Your audit agencies are not going to do that. So we basically want to be the solution. We strive to be the solution where there is a secondary layer of protection from a security point of view in case if the protocols get hacked. And that's basically the need for insurance. And over the last 2 years, we have managed to perfect out our protocol. It's completely built on chain. But however, we have quite failed to raise awareness about this as a product for users. We want to spread awareness to people within the DeFi community, people building within this space, that there is actually insurance products accessible to you guys, which you can tap into to provide an additional layer of security for your users. And yeah, we're here to talk to fellow builders, let them know about the security options that they have. One thing which we have recently tried to do is the Watchdogs program, which is sort of like a comprehensive security solution. I can try to get into that later on in the conversation for quite.
Sure. And interrupt me if I forget. We do want to talk about your Watchdog program. So let's jump over to Ritwik for a moment. Ritwik, it's basically the same question,
yeah,
but I'll reframe it for you, right? So the question originally was, what is the problem that you're solving? And since you did allude to making a comparison with bridges,
yeah,
the two most hacked, and the audience is for the benefit of the context for them,
yeah,
the two most hacked areas in the Web3 blockchain space are usually smart contracts and bridges. The kernel, actual chain, has almost never been hacked.
correct.
In any protocol, mind you. So the hacks are happening at a higher level. So given that, right, and given that you are in the interoperability business, so what is the problem that you are solving, and why aren't bridges solving that problem?
Right. So in order to address this question, I think what we Indians call the Nade ki baat, right, which is the moot point, right? So it's actually a two-pronged way of looking at it. So if you want to eliminate bridges, right, if we are in the business of eliminating bridges, there are actually two key aspects to address. One is capital efficiency, and the other is security. So capital efficiency, because that's also very, very important, because we as builders need to realize that the users today are more comfortable transacting on a centralized exchange. No matter how big an ecosystem all of us might think that we've created, but a user still prefers transacting on a centralized exchange. And the user is willing to let go of custody, albeit for a better transaction cost. So the idea is we need to solve for both. And when I alluded to bridges in the beginning, so like I mentioned, it's two-pronged. So one being making cross-chain transactions more capital efficient, and be more secure. So for the sake of this discussion, I'll keep it more towards the security angle, because we also have Sujith here, who's from insurance. So I think that's what they're trying to, make aware, right? So I'll probably stick that. So if you look at bridges, right, if you want to analyze why they've been hacked, or most importantly, where we are today in terms of evolution, we need to start with how they've progressed so far over time, right? So earlier, bridges were in the business of moving value from one chain to the other. That involved locking assets in a particular bridge contract and then releasing it on the destination network. That itself was architecturally a very weak solution. That got replaced by moving messages, not value, from one chain to the other. And then we've also seen things progress towards the relayer being, from the protocol's end, but the validator network being probably an independent one. Now we've also seen another sort of evolution in that front wherein you have the validators, which are effectively not linked with the core protocol at all, but they're also relying on a third-party consensus layer. So the idea is when you're looking at bridge security, you can't do without bridges, right? So even if we are in the business of eliminating them, but there's still some sort of cross-chain communication element happening between our ecosystems because you just can't build an interconnected sort of ecosystem without having communication being done between two independent networks. But the idea is how do you make it harder and harder, or how do you deter miscreants from probably taking advantage of any sort of vulnerabilities, right? So what we've effectively done is, so what next, right? So if you look at GMP protocols today, like general message passing protocols today, the likes of a layer 0, the likes of a CCIP, the likes of an Axelar who's also an investor in SYNTHR. So what they're effectively doing is, I'll take the example of, say, a layer 0. So what they've done is they have a light relayer stack, which any user application can basically plug into and use. And what they're effectively doing is, so you have core contracts, then you have cross-chain communication, which is being done by a relayer, which is provided by layer 0. But in this case, the validation is being done by a third-party independent oracle, which is Chainlink in this case. So what they've done is they've created these multiple barriers to entry. Now, what SYNTHR is doing in order to make this more and more secure, the idea is you need to look at bridging as not just, I would say, a consensus stack. The idea is to make it into a security stack. And, but of course, the user will eventually have to pay for additional security. But the idea is, let's say a user wants to communicate between two networks today using SYNTHR and wants to stake on one network and mint on the other. The user can actually take the advantage of two independent consensus mechanisms. So if a user wants cross-chain finality, in this particular case, and wants an added layer of security, the user can simply say that, all right, you know what, I want to send this message via layer 0, and you have, say, Chainlink validating that message. But what I also want is maybe an Axelar also validating the same message. So you add an added layer of security. So the idea is bridging is more like an evolution conversation. And this is where we are today. I'm sure there'll be more other solutions getting prepared and made as we speak. But this is where we are. So that's how we are making it more and more secure for users. So the idea is you can't do without them, but the idea is how do you make them more and more secure for users to feel comfortable. And of course, have an added layer of security in the form of insurance as well. But the problem with all of this is whether you provide two layers of security to a user in the form of twin consensus, or you add, say, insurance at a user level or at a protocol level. What all of us need to do is, and I'm sure Sujith is doing a wonderful job at it, and that's something that we also end up doing, is that making the users more and more aware that if you want security, security comes at a price. Because if, say, a user wants a twin consensus mechanism, the user has to pay extra gas. If the user wants to transact on a protocol that is insured, the user will have to pay an extra price because the price will effectively be passed on to the user. That's how a business will operate. So the idea is we need to make users more and more aware that, you know what, if you're analyzing two protocols, you should rather go with something which is more secure and don't mind paying that extra buck or two because your entire transaction is more secure. So I think I would like to think I'm in the business of eliminating bridges and making omni-chain ecosystems. But I think both Sujith and I would agree is that we're probably in the business of making users more and more aware of how to make a better choice.
Thank you, Ritwik. Before I switch gears into the next area, which is around measurement of risk for you, Sujith, and measurement of liquidity for
Absolutely.
you, Ritwik, I do want to give the audience a chance that I promised for any questions that you might have. And I'm sure somebody can bring a microphone to you. Anyone wants to, spur the room with a question right there?
Fantastic.
Excellent. Makes my job easier.
I'll be loud enough, but
Sure.
in 2 lines, tell me how SYNTHR is better than synthetics. So simple lines.
How is SYNTHR better than synthetics?
It's actually a very, I mean, I get asked this question quite a few times, but are you from synthetics, by the way? Okay.
No, you can be honest in the answer.
All right, fair enough. So first and foremost, if you look at SNX, right, and I don't blame them because I've been a user of SNX back when they were called Haven, to be honest. They started.
We'll keep it brief, right? So we don't want not a very elaborate comparison here.
All right, 2 lines. Okay, so high solvency and interoperability, right? So all synthetic assets on SYNTHR are backed by highly liquid collateral. So you have ETH, USDC, or USDT backing all synthetic assets. We are also exploring certain high-quality yield-bearing assets as well that will back these synthetic assets. But if you look at SNX, all their synthetic assets are backed by their native token. Now, that for me is a big solvency risk, right? I wouldn't want to own a synthetic asset or let alone imagine that sort of synthetic asset being a liquidity layer which others can actually tap into because there's a huge solvency risk there. And the other bit is interoperability. So what they've done is they're actually looking at the whole interoperability space by integrating with CCIP, and they're effectively using interop protocols as bridges. But the idea is what SYNTHR effectively does is this omni-chain architecture allows you to stake collateral on any network and mint a fully backed synthetic asset on any network. So you could have $3,000 spread across 3 different networks, but you can mint a synthetic asset on any of these 3 networks fully backed by the collateral which is on these 3 networks. So you don't have to bridge your collateral onto one network and then stake it and then mint. So that's, I think, as short as I could have made it. I would love to probably elaborate more, but for the sake of time, I can't.
There's going to be a quiz after this. Any other questions before I jump back in? Okay, so I'm going to switch gears to what I already alerted you. So by now you probably have thought through the answers, and that is measurement, right? So let me just set the context for the benefit of the audience over here of what I have in mind. I'm not going to present that piece as a question. I'll present it as a context. So with last year being a pretty bloody year for decentralized finance, after the FTX collapse, there was a huge rush to prove reserves that all the other survivors had. So this notion of proof of reserve came up. And there is a way through Merkle trees in computer science on how you can hash through the blockchain at the leaves, pick up the assets of all the assets of the protocol and basically enumerate it and come up with the reserves that are available over there. However, they've received a rap. I'll point you, if anybody is interested, to a paper that Bank of America came up with on some of the problems related to proof of reserves. That's just the context setting. Let me just up-level that context with a question, and that is, what is an acceptable way of measuring? How do you get telemetry? How do you get telemetry and measurements? And these have to be, because of the nature of the business we are in, these are shifting, they're changing, it's near real time. So how do you get the measurements? Sujith, I'll go to you first. How do you get, in your case, for reinsurance and insurance, how do you get measurement of risk? And then the same question for Ritwik later, measurement of liquidity.
That's a very good question. Specifically, I would like to answer some of the problems addressed when it comes to proof of reserve, and where we sort of, like personally at Unori, we were part of the team responsible for underwriting some of the products which were based around like FTX, and also even during the time when US Terra Luna crash was happening, we were also looking into underwriting a couple of products there as well. One of the main problems with proof of reserves is obviously why it's the terminology itself. Proof of reserves does not guarantee solvency for an exchange, which is exactly where the problem lies, right? Proof of reserves can only guarantee that an exchange has so much in balance, but then that's not exactly what represents an exchange. Those funds needs to be accessible by the users at the end of the day, right? Like, and also when you look at Merkle trees from a technical concept, it's quite complex, and the nature in which you build your Merkle trees is only as good as how good your proving logic is, right? Is your prover built in a independent enough way that even if the centralized exchange, which might have an incentive to act in bad faith, can be independently assessed with like a decentralized proving logic, right? So that's where some of the major issues lies, and also it does not take into account the liabilities, and also centralized exchanges often have the practice of setting up fake accounts, injecting volume into that to bump up the reserves to show like fake exchange volume, even though they might not be solvent fully on the user side. Coming to the topic of like how we assess risk, we at Unori believe that assessing risk should be a lot more active, if not proactive always, right? Like insurance is sort of like a proactive solution, and if it's like something that you don't believe in, or if you're not able to get, at least having like an active solution built into your protocol or built into your Web3 infrastructure is like quite important. Like especially coming back to like proof of reserves. The problem with that is like it's associated with like timestamps, right? So there is a problem with the Merkle trees getting stale after a certain point of time. And it's also quite computationally expensive, like especially when you want to do like proof of reserves using ZK snarks, etc. It's not something that you could do real time always. So having like a active solution, which is like tracking the balances, the user assets, quite real time, is one of the ways which you could like assess and measure risk, especially associated with these sort of like centralized exchanges. Along with that, something that we do quite often, this is talking more broader from like a DeFi protocol point of view, is that we also do a lot of active monitoring and tracking at the mempool, at the sequencer level on these networks to make sure that there is no malicious transactions which is interacting with the protocols that we are covering, right? That's one of the key metrics. Like, we are not like a traditional insurer. We know that there's not enough historical data to be able to underwrite or use the traditional approach to underwrite an insurance cover for them. So our approach is a lot more like innovative, diverse. It's a lot more like active when it comes to like risk.
Thank you so much, Sujith. It's very, very interesting, all that you are pushing the envelope on. Ritwik, the same question to you, basically. How do you get telemetry? How do you measure, in your case, liquidity?
So I think what Sujith alluded to while he was responding to the question, right? So I think this challenge lies mostly at centralized exchange levels, right? Because you have this big pool of, I would say, funds which can effectively be accessed by a couple of wallets, right? Wallet holders in this case. But if you look at DeFi protocols in general, right? So what SYNTHR is effectively based on. So SYNTHR, if you look at it, it's, in a nutshell, it's a CDB protocol, right? So you are locking in funds and you're minting, say, a collateralized debt position against it. So that particular collateral is actually linked to that particular synthetic asset which is minted and it's verifiable on-chain, right? So it's not that you have a couple of multi-sigs that can actually go in and just tamper with the funds which are locked in, because the moment I do that, the entire backing of all my synthetic assets goes through a toss. So it's effectively a large-scale CDP protocol. So I would say this risk to a great extent gets allayed. But what we've also done is now, again, this is something that we understand, but what we need to ensure is that the user feels secure in holding these synthetic assets, knowing that there is full liquidity backing them at any given point in time. So what we've gone ahead and done is we are actually in talks with several on-chain insurers so that the entire collateral pool is actually fully insured. So if, say, a user is depositing $150 worth of collateral and minting $100 of synthetic asset, so they're anyway over-collateralized. So there's anyway a $50 or a 50% over-collateralization ratio, which the user can feel secure about. Secondly, it's a CDP, so those funds are anyway inaccessible by me. And thirdly, that entire pool of $150 is fully insured up to the penny, right? So in case of any smart contract vulnerabilities, in case of any sort of miscreants, et cetera, we have a mechanism in place in which the user will be fully insured. And the cost of this insurance is going to be borne by the protocol. So we understand that insurance is probably a bit too mature an idea for a user to grasp, but at a protocol level, that's a step that we can take, and that's what we are doing effectively.
Yeah, let me just try to summarize that portion of the discussion for the benefit of the audience. Traditional finance looks at assets and liabilities, right? And assets and liabilities just by themselves don't give you the entire picture, and they certainly don't give you the entire picture in DeFi. And the reason it is more peculiar and challenging for DeFi is because of the nature of the dynamic nature of decentralized finance protocols. So this notion of assets and liabilities, assets versus liabilities, your assets have to be greater than your liabilities. Shouldn't it really be liquid assets versus liquid liabilities?
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And I think the gentleman who asked the question, and while I was responding to that, was pretty much in line with what you were asking right now, is that you need to have liquid assets, backing liquid, sort of liquid liabilities being backed by liquid assets. So what we're focused on is all synthetic assets on SYNTHR can only be minted against, say, ETH, USDC, or USDT. So you don't, at this particular point in time, with the resources that DeFi presents and cryptocurrency presents, it doesn't get more liquid, say, from ETH or a USDC or a USDT perspective. So which is what we've done is we've actually whitelisted only these 3 forms of collateral which can actually enter the entire collateral pool. And these are the only form of assets which can actually go on to back the liabilities that we're talking about. And what we've done is in the initial stages, although we will move to a point where we will become decentralized, we will have the DAO basically listing synthetic assets through permissionless listing. But at this point in time, we've restricted the kind of synthetic assets that can be traded to highly liquid ones. So what we're doing is, we're stickler for risks, right? So what we're doing is we're assessing this risk on a day-on-day basis and ensuring that the kind of assets that are being staked are highly liquid in nature, and the kind of synthetic assets that are being minted are also highly liquid in nature, of course. Right. Yeah.
Sujith, I'm going to give you a slot of time in just a minute to the question that I know you want to answer. But I really want to switch to a different question. How much time do we have? We done? Okay, so why don't you talk about Watchdog, because I promised you will speak about that.
Thank you, Gurvinder. So Watchdog is sort of like a new program which we are launching internally at Unori to spread awareness about insurance and other holistic security solution. So far, over the last course of last 6 to 8 months, we have been running it as an invite-only program to builders, protocols, Web3 infrastructure projects, providing them everything from a ground-up solution, so taking into account security from the ground layer, things about embedded insurance, economic risk assessments, continuous audits, active monitoring, incident response plans. These sort of products, we package it as a solution under our Watchdog program and offer it to protocols. And now it's accessible to any other DeFi protocols. We just announced that the program is public just yesterday. And if you're interested, you can come to our website, watchdog.unori.io, and apply to participate.
Ritwik, why don't you wrap up by telling the audience what your social handles are? How do they get hold of you?
Just log on to our website. It's SYNTHR.io. You can track me on Twitter as well. It's SY Ritwik, so synthetic Ritwik. That's how we're.
And Sujith, how do they get hold of you?
You can reach out to me on my Discord. You can join our protocols Discord. I'm pretty active there. Just drop in, say hi. If you have any questions, happy to answer.
Thank you, Sujith. Thank you, Ritwik. I'm Gurvinder Ahluwalia. You can find me on LinkedIn. I also put a little preview of this discussion we had on LinkedIn. Thanks, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the evening. And thanks so much to the show organizers.